to episode 4 of Coffee and Co-Read, your source for all things literary with Catherine.
Where we believe there's nothing better than a hot coffee and an awesome book. Join us for our virtual book club where we take one book a month and dive into all the drama, adventure, and romance we can find.
Hey.
Hi.
So, because we went over coffee, we figured this would be a good time to talk about what we like to drink. For me, on a daily basis, I just drink black, dark roast coffee. The darker the coffee, the better. It's the reason I get out of bed in the morning. We have a coffee maker that just makes the coffee as soon as we want it in the morning, and it wakes us up with the wonderful smell of coffee in our bedroom. And then if I go to a coffee shop, I usually order either a red eye, or if I'm feeling fancy, I'll order a con panna, which is just a shot or 2 shots of espresso with whipped cream on top. What about you?
Yeah, so since we essentially have like never ending winter / spring fall, like our summer is decent, but it's not great. So I literally can drink hot coffee every single day, which is amazing. I schedule mine to like brew a full pot before I wake up in the morning. It is the same. It's like dark roast. Also drink it black. And I feel like that just stems from when we worked in the coffee shop. We didn't have time if we wanted a coffee, you poured it and you drank it. You didn't have time to doctor it and like add milk and sugar to it. So we just got used to black coffee.
Yeah.
I bring a 1.5 liter thermos to work with me every single day. My students honestly think that I'm going to die from caffeine overload. They think I need to switch to water. But when I do go to a coffee shop, it's weird. I get a huge latte with like extra shot of espresso, a little bit of like sugary syrup. So I go almost like 2 extremes. So I hate milk in my coffee at home, but for some reason I'm okay with it when I go out and buy it from other professionals. So I don't know. It's bizarre.
Makes sense.
On that note, this is our 4th and final week of A Discovery of Witches. We're going to talk the ending now. Make sure you keep listening until the very end to see what book we're going to be reading in April. Also, a heads up, we are not a spoiler-free zone, and things could get a little saucy. We are looking at our last week of Discovery of Witches. We're going from chapters 34 all the way to chapter 42, the very end of the book. So last week we end with them sort of having a romantic moment, we'll say. Like, they don't have sex, but he gets her off, which is nice. I mean, it's really nice. I feel like he cares very much about her stress levels. Well, you say pleasure, I say stress levels. Like, it seems like he really cares about whether, she gets off without really caring about him. Maybe it's a delayed gratification sort of thing. So that was where we left off last week. It was nighttime and I guess they go to bed after that. The next day, Diana wakes up and finds Matthew is not there. So she goes downstairs and she sees her aunts, Sarah and Emily, standing in the kitchen watching him outside. I just found it a really funny scene, actually, because they're just staring at him from their kitchen window, watching him meditate in the garden. And I don't know if they're like appreciating his handsomeness or if they're just sort of weirded out that there's a vampire meditating in their garden. But I could just picture her coming downstairs and seeing these 2 women like just staring at this guy, like being so still in the backyard. So she goes outside with him, like just sort of like, oh yeah, crazy old aunts, and goes outside and they meditate together, obviously. And through the meditation, she cups some water in her hands and gains the ability to like detect water underground. And it's sort of insinuating that, she's finally letting her third eye sort of in and letting it take control, which is good for her. She's sort of figuring out how she can use her magic. When they go inside, I thought this was a really cute scene too. So she made toast for breakfast, but she needed more butter. And all of a sudden, butter floats out of from the fridge and sits down in front of her. And I actually thought, before they sort of explained it a little more, I thought it was the house delivering her butter.
Yeah, I could see that too. The house is magical too, so and it gives them stuff all the time, so why wouldn't you think the house?
Yeah. Anyway, but then they're like, oh no, that was you. They were sort of wondering, well, how did you do that? She said, I don't know. I just thought in my head that I needed more butter. And then they sort of figure out, well, of course, your magic is wrapped up in need, which is also something that I sort of question. So she was spellbound by her parents, we talked about last time. When she was kidnapped and she was in the hole, like the pit well thing, it said that she had to unravel her ribbons, and like that's what her parents sort of spellbound her with, is like these magic, almost it was like magic ribbons binding her magic, and she had to pull them and loosen them so that she could use her magic. So I sort of thought that she wasn't spellbound anymore.
I don't think she is.
So,
What?
here's the question. If she's not spellbound anymore, why is her magic still bound in need? Because they comment and say, oh, your parents are brilliant. They tied your magic so that you could, when you really have need of it, you can command it and call it and it can help you. But
Hmm.
if you just want to do something, then you can't, which is why, she got to call Ashmole 782. Like,
Hmm.
she needed the book for her research, so she called it. She needed to get out of that pit, so she levitated. Like,
Yeah.
all of her magic has stemmed in what she needs, but I thought she wasn't spellbound anymore, so I figured she, like, when she did that water in her cupped hands and can detect the areas of water 2 minutes ago, she didn't need that water. So
Yeah.
it just seems like a bit contradictory here. Anyway, after they sort of had this discussion, the house wants to show them something and like sort of does some things to make them aware that the house wants them for something. It just makes me wish I had a conscious house.
Yeah.
Like, I wish I had a house that could talk to me and like hide things for me and keep, like, I could be like, oh, this document is super important, I better not get lost, and then have the house tuck it away for me and then bring it back when I needed it. It would save me a lot of trouble.
Yeah, definitely. Like, where's my birth certificate? I have no idea.
It would be very helpful. So yeah, so the house wants to show them something. Turns out it's a lovely letter from her mother. So I guess we've discussed that her mother is a seer and can see the future, and her father is also really powerful and talented. So they sort of know that they're going to die really before they go. So they write her a letter for now. It also had one of the missing Ashmole 782 pages that had been torn from the book. So
Yeah.
3 pages missing from the book, and they have one. And I think theoretically, if they restore the 3 pages, the book will become intact again and readable.
Yeah. Manuscript underneath the manuscript will become readable because the rest of it's still fine. The alchemy part is still fine.
Yes. Letter said that if she was reading the letter, they successfully tricked the congregation into thinking that it was her father that had all the power, when I guess really it was Diana that had it all. The picture itself shows the chemical wedding, which is, it's when two metals join together to create gold. So in the picture, it's two humans, but I guess in alchemy, it's a typical symbol of the chemical wedding of two metals combining to create gold. And funny enough, the bride is wearing Matthew's crest, which is an odd coincidence. It almost makes you wonder, like, did whoever wrote Like, did they know Matthew? Like, it just seems too coincidental to be anything other than purposeful.
Yeah, like the person that drew it, did they know Matthew in the past, and did they draw it because of him? And then why did they do that?
It's a question, isn't it? So her mom said in the letter that she tied her magic to her feelings to Matthew, which also is what sort of caused the panic attacks that she had. I guess it sort of answered the question, but it sort of doesn't at the same time. Like, obviously, her magic started to sort of come more into it, sort of became more powerful after she met Matthew, but also, why would that cause the panic attacks? Anyway, she
Yeah.
did say she was sorry. She didn't like doing that to her child, and she didn't like knowing that it would cause panic attacks, like her not being able to use her magic. But it was to keep her safe. We also learned that she was a call bearer, which is an interesting term. It means you are born with the amniotic sac, like, still wrapped around you. And apparently it's a sign of luck, and that the child born is usually a creature. So either a witch or a demon. We know that vampires are not born, they're made. So I think they're sort of excluded from that. But yeah, it's a sign that the child will be a creature. It also states that calls have a lot of power and that it should have been kept and preserved somewhere.
I don't know if it
Um,
ever comes back. Do we ever hear about it again?
Not in this book. We do not.
No.
Also, one of my favorite lines sort of happens. It's not a happy line. It's really sad. But she says, a sound of loss started somewhere deep within me. So, I guess she had this idea of what happened to her parents and what she was deprived of. But now she's sort of learning that she was really deprived of a whole other life where she could have learned to use her magic properly and grown up with two parents. And she's grieving that life, and essentially that her parents sacrificed themselves to keep her alive. It's gut wrenching,
Yeah.
right? Like, knowing that she could have had something, but it got stolen from her. And it's like a whole other life that she didn't even know she could have had. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's one thing to grieve people, which absolutely, yes, it's heartbreaking enough to lose your parents, but to then also realize that you not only lost your parents, but you lost out on the life you should have had.
Yeah, especially when everyone in her family expected her to embrace magic and she just was unable to do it and then kind of shut it out of her life because of that and
Yeah.
because of her parents too. But then it was probably all those feelings were related to being spellbound as opposed to just
Yeah.
her being afraid of it.
So after she lets all of her sadness out and, like, they have the appropriate, like, oh, are you okay sort of moment, Matthew gets two phone calls. One from a character named Hélène. It's his father, Squire, who transferred his loyalty to Matthew when Philippe died. I would love to have a Squire.
Yes.
He's the one who delivered, I guess, before they left France. He wrote out some Knights of Lazarus letters and gave them to Hélène to deliver. He delivered one to Marcus, who apparently was really unhappy to get it, which is why Hélène called to say Marcus was not happy to get this letter. The second phone call he got is from Marcus, who was pissed. He was like, I don't want this letter. And Matthew was sort of like, well, you sort of knew what you signed up for when you joined the Knights of Lazarus. So I guess he's enacting the Knights of Lazarus to protect Diana and saying that it's a matter of duty. She needs our protection. Marcus and Miriam are going to come to New York. They have something to talk about. So they're like, we're coming to New York. So they're going to go and hang out, and it's going to be great. After that, they discuss Ashmole 782 a little bit more. Diana, sort of staring at the page, and she wants to look at it. M and Sarah drop another bomb from, I guess, her past, that her dad, Stephen Proctor, can time walk, which means that he can walk through time. So he can go back in time, he can go forward in time, which is a really interesting sort of development. So it sort of stands to reason, well, if he could do it, maybe Diana can also do it. They also notice on the back of Rebecca's letter a note in other handwriting. It's obviously it's her dad's handwriting. Diana recognizes it. And they figure out that there was also similar writing in the original Ashmole manuscript on the inside of the first page. So she realizes that her dad's the one that spelled Ashmole 782 for her to retrieve. He made it so that only she could get it out. So we figure out why she was the one who could get it out, and also why she couldn't get it the second time, because she didn't need it. To time walk, you need 3 things from the time period you want to go to. I find this sort of inconvenient.
Yeah.
Like, just think about it. If you want to go, if I wanted to go visit Elizabeth I myself, where am I getting 3 things from the 16th century?
I guess if you're that rich, you can probably do it. But like, how do you know it's not a replica? Or like, yeah, it'd be very hard.
And like, what if you're not rich?
Well, then you can't.
Because
The
I
end.
I wouldn't have said that Diana's family were like loaded rich.
No, true.
I
Well, I
mean,
guess if you can do magic, maybe you can just steal stuff.
I don't think that's. I feel like that's frowned upon.
Borrow? You can borrow for a period of time
I
and then
guess.
return.
I find it really funny because so they start talking about time walking, and Diana's like, "Well, maybe I could learn to time walk." And Emily and Sarah both say, "Well, geez, of course you can time walk. You've been time walking since you were 3 years old." And it was just funny because it just shows how many secrets they've kept from her. But like, yeah, of course you've been time walking. Like up until you were spellbound, you time walked everywhere.
But like Sarah doesn't know that she was spellbound. So what does Sarah like? Does she just assume that Diana just gave up on it because she didn't want to do it anymore? It just seems kind of odd that Sarah's like, maybe that's why they clashed heads so much because Sarah just thinks that Diana was like, screw this, I don't want to be a witch. And there's really a whole lot more to it, I guess.
This part's funny. So she's going to drink that tea. I guess in the last section, we talk about how while Matthew is gone, Mart, the housekeeper, teaches her how to make tea and says you got to be very specific of giving a pinch of each of the 8 herbs in each tea bag. And at first Diana is sort of questioning it because she's like, well, why can't I just mix all the herbs in a bowl together and scoop it into a tea bag? And Marta's like, no, you cannot do that. You need to make sure that each tea bag gets an equal amount of each herb. And she said, drink a cup every day. You have to promise. So she says, okay. So then they're in New York and she goes to make this tea. And I guess her aunts notice and smell like what the herbs are. And they're like, why are you using that as a contraceptive? Like, you could totally get better contraceptives out there. She had no idea, but the tea is contraceptive tea. Um, for some reason, after that, they go out and like feel each other up against a tree. There's a lot of sexual tension between the two. They need to consummate their marriage. Like,
Yeah.
she wants it, and she wants it right then and there against that tree. And again, Matthew is the one having to like hold back and be like, no, we're in the woods, like 20 feet from your aunt's house. They can probably see us and hear us. Like, I just don't understand. I get there's a time and a place, but just
It
do it
should have
already.
it should have already been by
Yes.
now.
Yes, it should have been done.
Yep.
But it's sort of, he's like, nope. So they go back in the house. We learn a little bit more about Bridget Bishop here and how their bishop, the bishop grimoire, like their family spell book that gets handed down, was Bridget Bishop's. It mentions the 3 husbands that she had, which you mentioned way back in part 1 when you did your deep dive on Bridget Bishop.
Yeah, because I didn't remember that they talk about it later. If I did, I just probably wouldn't have brought it up, but
It's It's fine.
Yeah.
So she had 3 husbands, and her first child she had it as a teen in the 1650s. So yikes. I guess it's sort of par for the course for the, 17th century, but still. Uh, but I guess she gave her child up to a wealthy London couple along with the grimoire. So, like, she gave her child the grimoire and then gave the child to a wealthier family.
Mhm.
And I'm wondering, like, did she know what was up? That, like, she was potentially gonna get tried as a witch? Like, maybe she
Yeah.
was trying to part her family so that they didn't suspect her child of being a witch. I don't know. Then Marcus and Miriam show up and drop a bit of a bombshell on Diana. Um, Miriam is sort of looking at the page and she says, yes, like, I agree. I think this chemical wedding page is sort of a reflection of Diana and Matthew because the bride has Matthew's crest on it. The groom has sort of some symbolism that could relate to Diana. And she says, well, what normally comes after a wedding, Diana? And she's like, oh my God. So they're trying to insinuate like a baby. This part made me laugh because it caused her to feel faint. This whole realization that first comes love, then comes marriage, and then comes a baby in the baby carriage. Uh, like, so because they have gotten married, now, there should be, there's an insinuation of pregnancy. And it's like, what, she's so delicate that just thinking about being pregnant causes her to faint? She's obviously not pregnant because they haven't had sex yet.
Good point.
So she's not fainting because she might be pregnant. She's definitely not. But I just don't understand why, for such a strong character, a strong female sort of independent character, she faints really because they talk about pregnancy. Like, grow up.
Yeah, agreed.
Uh, I didn't tune out after this, but they sort of do a whole bunch of science talk after this. So not that I tuned out, but it sort of became more like high school again. They say that Diana has a ton of powers because she absorbed her twin in the womb, who was supposed to have half the powers. So she has all the markers for all the witch powers. Really, she was only supposed to have half the witch powers, and her brother was supposed to have the other half. So she wasn't supposed to time walk. That was her brother's power, but she absorbed him in the womb and got everything. But yeah, it's some sort of like weird scientific phenomenon that happens every once in a while, but it apparently happened to her. Of course it did. They also mentioned that it can actually be possible for creatures to have babies together after all. Initially they were saying, well, how on earth would this be possible? But they're saying, well, maybe it is. Like, they made this rule so that nobody really ever
tried.
So maybe people can have babies. We also learned that her mitochondrial witch DNA, don't know what that is the oldest and secret lineage. I have no idea how they even figured this out, but it's like they named it MT Lilith. Of course they did. And apparently it's over 40,000 years old. I have no idea how they figured that out. Like, not a Scooby-Doo. So I'm just moving on. If anybody knows anything about ancient mitochondrial DNA, let us know. Turns out we get sort of more backstory on Miriam here. She's pissed. So we sort of talked about how Matthew killed this girl that he loved. So he was fighting with his brother Baldwin and accidentally killed this girl. This killing, I guess she was sort of a noble lady, a noble girl, caused a war. And the Knights of Lazarus tried to end the war, but the other side, they were not content. They said somebody has to answer for the death of this girl. And Bertrand, who was Miriam's mate and husband, took the blame. So he was beheaded.
Just kind of bullshit.
It is kind of bullshit, isn't it? One, that either Matthew or Baldwin did not take the blame because it was their fault.
Yeah.
Two, like, I don't know all the rest of the Knights of Lazarus, obviously, but couldn't there have been a member that didn't have a wife that wouldn't have been like irrevocably like heartbroken if they died? I just like, what about the squire, Ellen?
What a sin. Poor
I know.
Ellen. But yeah, they needed a scapegoat, like, which is why couldn't it have been Matthew? It was literally them that did it.
Yeah, I think it's bullshit.
Yeah, I don't know why she's working with Matthew. I would
No.
never get over that.
So the house decided, I guess the witches and the vampires, they're not getting along at first. And it sort of makes sense. Like, they've been conditioned all their lives to sort of hate each other. So they keep bickering. So the house locks them all in, but it kicks Diana and Matthew out. So they go for a nice little walk. And I just thought that was really funny. Like, the house is locking people in. It's like, get along. It's like, you ever see that picture online of the two kids in the t-shirt? And it's like, this is our get along t-shirt. It's like one big t-shirt that they have to wear.
Yeah.
And that's what it reminds me of.
Yeah, this is the get along
House. Yeah. They already talk about, so I guess this sort of news that they could potentially procreate and have kids, they start talking about it, like about having kids. And while yes, I understand it's important in terms of a relationship to figure out if you guys are on the same page when it comes to children, I also feel like they've known each other 3 weeks. This should not be a conversation. Like, they haven't even had sex. They've been married, quote unquote, for like a week, have not had sex, and now they're talking about babies.
If you think that it's not possible, I guess you'd talk about it.
They also talk about how the vampires set up a blood fridge, which is hilarious. And obviously, of course, they do. They can't really go hunting in the area. So, blood fridge, next best thing.
Yeah.
Then there's a weird conversation between Matthew and Diana. He automatically knows when she's going to start her period. But, like, again, they've known each other 3 weeks and she hasn't had one yet. So how the hell does he know that she's when her period is?
I guess he's like, well, it's been 3 weeks. It must be coming soon.
Maybe. I was...
No, I get, like, he could sense it. It seems
Yeah.
like from what he's saying that he can sense that it's going to happen. Yeah, I get
like
it.
he can smell it happening. Like, gross.
He can smell it when she's ovulating. Sorry.
Then she even asked if he could be around her while she was menstruating. Which is just hilarious. Like, what does she think he'd... Like, how does he live if he can't be around a menstruating woman?
Yeah, that's...
If he is so overcome with hunger that he's gonna, like...
Oh my god, gross. He's gonna pull her pants off?
I mean, maybe she'd like that.
Well, she's probably not feeling too great, so something that could help.
Anyway, it was just hilarious overall. But, like, in all fairness, if I was with a vampire, yeah, and I didn't know anything about them, it might be something I'd ask.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, probably. She does ask a lot of dumb questions, but then I'm like, if you're actually with somebody, you ask them dumb questions all the time.
Okay, so Matthew asks Marcus to be his marshal for the Knights of Lazarus. The marshal is sort of like the war strategist, like the guy who heads up the actual, like...
Battle planning?
Yeah, like the battle planning and the sort of the strategy stuff. Marcus is pissed because he doesn't want to be the marshal. He feels like he's too young. He's like 300 years old. I guess in comparison to Matthew, he is pretty young, but 300, dude. And he's seen war before. Like,
Poor baby.
I know. He was a soldier in the American Army. So, it's not like he's a stranger to war. So, but he's being a baby. A big old baby. We have a few, like, household things happening now. So, like, we go through a few days of them being in the house, and Diana's taking magic lessons from Sarah, but she sucks at it, and she's frustrated that she's no good at it. And then all of a sudden, she for lack of a better term, I'm going to say she apparated. It's a Harry Potter term where they disappear from one place and end up in another. I know it's the wrong world, but it's the word that fits in my brain.
Yeah.
So she apparated to the garden under an apple tree because she wanted to get away from Sarah, but she was also hungry. So I guess her body took that need under advisement. Her frustration was palpable. Like,
Hmm.
and in all fairness, Sarah is not a great teacher.
She doesn't have patience.
No, she didn't have patience. I mean, she was like, this is so simple. Like, this is an entry level spell that like kids learn to do when they're 5 or 6 years old. You should be able to do this. And then, like, essentially, you're not concentrating. Come on, like, concentrate. And it's just like, it's not helpful.
Yeah, but we already kind of know that it's not going to work because she doesn't need to light that candle.
No, you're
So
right.
I don't really understand how they go back and forth between like she's only doing the magic that she needs to do, and then they're like, why can't she do this easy magic? It's like she doesn't need to do that easy magic. She
No.
wants to. She gets frustrated that she can't, but she doesn't need it.
But yeah, it's true. So she can't do the simple spells like lighting a candle, but yet she's annoyed because she can summon witch fire or witch water or witch wind or fly. She can do these things, but yet she can't do the simple stuff, which is frustrating her. It's also frustrating Sarah. So I get why she would want to sort of get away from her, especially when, like, obviously there's so much pressure on her to perform in a way. They're like, we're in danger, girl. You gotta step it up, and so, like, there's all this pressure on her to be able to control her magic, and she can't.
Well, and
So
protect herself. Figure it
yeah,
out.
yeah. So her and Matthew go for a nice little walk in the forest before supper, and they're playing around and, like, I don't know, like chasing each other and tickling and, doing things that newly married couples do, I guess.
Chasing each other in the woods like a newly married couple.
Yeah. But they feel another presence in the woods.
Yeah.
And Matthew realizes it's Juliette Durand, who we haven't really heard from. I think we got there might have been a mention of her in an earlier chapter in reference to Matthew and Marcus's
Hmm.
history.
Yeah.
But other than that, we really haven't heard about her before. But we figure out that she's Matthew's ex-girlfriend. Matthew sort of tries to call Marcus on the phone and leaves a message saying, OMG, Juliet is here. Like, get to us now. Apparently, Gerbert, the vampire guy that owns the castle that Diana was held hostage in, he introduced Juliet and Matthew. And apparently, she's gorge. Like, absolutely stunning. And obviously, Diana then starts to feel less, right? Like, OMG, she's so beautiful. Why on earth would he waste his time with me? Which is sort of so typical. Like,
A
he's
trope, if you will.
a trope, if you will, yes. But, like, he literally chose you out of everybody else. He has not been married since his wife died when he was a human 1,500 years ago. And he has chosen you to marry. Like, have
Hmm.
some confidence, lady.
Yeah.
But I guess plot device, they sort of have like a little chat and we get to know about Juliet. She's creepy. So she sort of approaches them in the woods, and every move that Diana makes, Juliet is sort of like does the exact same thing, like mirror images her to try and adopt her mannerisms. And, like,
Hmm.
can you just imagine a beautiful person approaching you and just trying to do everything you're doing while staring at you? It's
Yeah.
it's creepy. We learn that Gerbert has called Marcus on the phone to sort of occupy him and talk to him. So Marcus doesn't know that Matthew's in distress and doesn't know to check his messages or anything like that. We also learn that Gerbert crafted Juliet, like made her, broke her, rebuilt her to be everything that Matthew wants. My only question is, how does he know that? How does he know, like, how to create the perfect match for Matthew?
That is a very good question. I guess they were close at one point. It kind of seems like Gerbert, sorry, and Isabeau seem like they were friends, possibly. I don't know if that's the right word. Definitely not lovers. Frenemies? I don't know.
Matthew admits that, like, it worked. Like Juliet was perfect for him, and they were
Hmm.
together. They were together for a long time,
Yeah.
but for some reason, like, he still left her. But now, I guess, because she was, I guess it was insinuated that, again, Javert made her into a vampire and then broke her and then rebuilt her. she's a she was a human, not like she was a robot. So in breaking her and then rebuilding her, he, like, fundamentally broke her. Like,
Destroyed,
she
yeah. Destroyed
cray
whatever was in her that made her sane in any way.
yeah, like, she cray at this point.
Hmm.
So because he sort of made her sole reason for living this immortal life was to be Matthew's. And so he left her over 100 years ago, but she is still obsessed with figuring out, well, like, what does Diana have that she does not?
Hmm.
Why did he pick her? So she kisses Diana to see if maybe it's her kissing skills that make her better. Then she makes Diana and Matthew kiss as, like, a peeping Tom sort of scenario. It's a bit weird. But she's, like, just this fundamentally broken person. It's, like, creepy. And, like, the writing is actually really good in making her a really creepy character.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah,
way to
I agree.
go, Deborah
Yeah.
Harkness. All of a sudden, I guess they insult her a little bit, so she attacks Matthew, puts her hand through his chest, and slashes his throat. You know,
NBD.
yeah, MBD. Um, So she sort of does one pass first. Like, she attacks him once, and Diana, like, calls her witchfire, which displays itself as sort of like a fiery bow and arrow almost, conjured out of nothing. And she's sort of aiming it at Juliet and hesitates. And the hesitation causes Juliet to strike Matthew again and get him in the throat that time. So then she draws an arrow and shoots Juliet several times. It's a bit overkill, but she does it a whole bunch. Uh, and then just like that, Juliet is dead. We only got her for like a chapter or two. She was great
She
and
was a very interesting character.
very interesting character, yeah. And the girl who played her on the TV show did such a good job too, and she was gorgeous. And yeah, she had a bigger part than what she's in the books, but she did a really good job.
Yeah,
Um,
agreed.
of course, after all that, that's when everybody shows up. So, like, they couldn't show up before Juliet attacked Matthew, but now, of course, they're all coming to run. Matthew is dying because he can't heal himself in both places. And of course, Sarah says, "Oh, sweetie, like, you need to let him go." It's like, that's such a cliche thing to say,
Yeah.
but
Also, he's not dead yet. Like, just stop talking.
and Diana's like, hell no, and she's sort of like almost feral. She's hecka mad.
Hmm.
She grabs Sarah's knife. I guess Sarah always has a knife for cutting herbs and stuff. Puts this, like, fire circle around her and Matthew, and all of a sudden the goddess Diana is there, which I don't get at all. Like, did she summon her? Did she just show up? Like, what happened? How did she get there?
I I guess she summoned her. She kind of cried out to anybody, but yeah, it just seems kind of wild. Like,
She did call out for help, and then so this is like the goddess Diana, like the huntress,
yeah,
and comes, and she's sort of like a ghosty. Like, I don't know if anybody else saw her there.
an apparition of sorts.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know. Diana makes a deal for her to take anyone but him. And then Diana makes the deal with her, like, I'll come back for a favor, essentially. But we don't know what it is in this book. We don't get that closure. So
No.
So she slashes her elbow and feeds Matthew. And what do you think is going to happen? Obviously, he drinks enough to come back to consciousness. Like, he sort of wakes up, and then he's like, ooh, I'm hungry. And then he keeps drinking and drinking and drinking. He grabs her and drinks from her neck a little bit and sort of like, ngang, 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 ngang.
I'm sure he does that, yeah.
And obviously, because, you know, it wouldn't be a vampire book without a vampire drinking a bit too much, he took too much blood, so she passes out. Super predictable for a
Yeah.
vampire book.
So Diana wakes up in the forest, and Miriam and Marcus are kind of fixing her up. Miriam is apparently much older than Matthew, which I didn't really guess, and I guess I kind of forgot it too. But she just has always seemed younger to me. I don't really know why.
Well, I guess why would she work for him and sort of follow him
Mm.
and be underneath him if she was young, if she was older?
Yeah,
Like,
because yeah, she does take orders from him. Like she was following Diana around. Yeah, I guess that's probably why. But yeah, I really didn't think she's like apparently much older, which I don't. How much older can you get, man? Were you around when the dinosaurs were here? Like, I know
yeah.
there's time in between those two events, but they use vampire blood to seal Diana's wounds because magic apparently won't heal vampire wounds, which is part of the reason of why witches are afraid of vampires or why they don't like them. So she uses the vampire blood to seal the wounds, and then they're trying to get her to the vehicle, and Matthew's gone to get it ready or something. And Diana basically asks Miriam to make her a vampire if she's going to die because she doesn't want to leave Matthew. So Miriam agrees. She's kind of reluctant. She knows Matthew's going to lose his shit. It's a very Twilight moment, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
Matthew brings up the time that Diana asked about what she would taste like, which we talked about before, because he lost his mind, and says that she tastes of honey and hope.
Weird.
What does hope taste like? We don't have a whole lot in the world right now, so if you could tell us what hope tastes like, does it taste like beer? Because that's what I'm feeling. Like, must taste like coffee.
Yeah.
She's really having a hard time when you think about it since she met Matthew. She's always covered in bandages. Like every second day, it seems like she's getting very injured. So she wakes up from sleeping off her injuries again. And Miriam says Matthew is going to Canada to feed, which I personally think is rude.
Yeah.
I don't think they'll end up here, but still, we're not close to the border. But yeah,
But stay away, sir.
we don't want you here. So they talk about it, and they believe that Juliet came from the congregation, which to me seems a little bit insane. You'd think the congregation would use more official methods to try to get them to stop, as opposed to literally having an ex-girlfriend come try to kill him. But I would have thought that it would have been like a Gerbert thing, like Gerbert sent her, but they do say that they think it's the congregation.
It seems like Jabert is a member of the congregation.
Yeah.
So I feel like it wouldn't be above them to use, you know, sort of ulterior methods. And they've already sort of proven that they're not above like breaking the law for things. It just seems like a shady organization, if you ask me.
It does, but I almost feel like the demons wouldn't have agreed because, like, the witches took her. That's what Satu did, basically. That seemed like a witch thing, and then this seems kind of like a vampire thing. And I don't know. I kind of feel like the demons wouldn't have agreed to something like this. But yeah, Matthew wants to know what kind of magic Diana used to save him because he says he could smell it, but she doesn't really want to admit it. So she kind of asks about Juliet, and we get a tiny bit more about how Gerbert created her. And he kind of says that Gerbert either drove her to madness or she was partially mad before he found her. and he brought her to death over and over again before he, I guess, ultimately turned her. And Gerbert's plans for it was for Juliet to figure out everything about the knights and kind of infiltrate the de Clermont's family and then eventually kill Matthew. So she kind of did what she was asked to do. She was probably fine with dying, really. I guess she probably didn't infiltrate as much as Gerbert wanted, but she did do a really good job at trying to kill him. So, Matthew asks Diana to never use her magic to heal him in the future, and says that no one's ever going to change her into a vampire, especially Miriam, as in a little like, I saw what you did there kind of move, which is predictable for him.
But it sort of bothers me because it's not his place.
Mm-hmm.
So if she wants to turn into a vampire, she should be allowed if she wants to. It's not his job to say what she can and can't do.
Yeah.
And he's already decided he loves her enough to marry her and like be with her for as long as she's alive. So what's he gonna do if she turns into a vampire? Is he
Leave her?
gonna? But is he?
No. But that's the
No.
thing, like, if she's gonna die, wouldn't he rather her be a vampire than die? Like, I don't understand, especially if he's the one that killed her. He'd probably just kill himself afterwards if she had died then, I
Yeah.
guess. But it does seem really dumb. Like, if you're a vampire and somebody could live the rest of forever with you, wouldn't you want that?
I totally would.
Right? So Diana asks him to promise in return that he won't ask her to leave him when she's in danger, which is obviously something that is hard for him, but she's never really going to leave anyway. So I guess why does it matter if either of them make these promises? Because no one's going to keep them.
But like, I'm sorry. I'm not a coward. But if we are in danger and he says, "Hey, I'm going to fight this guy," or like, "Hey, there's a grizzly bear that I'm going to have to take down because he's like being aggressive." Can you like go hide somewhere? Like go run for help or something? Like
Since you're a human and I'm a vampire, yeah, 100%.
you would think that that would be okay, but
Yeah.
now she's saying no, like she's never going to leave him, so what, you're going to risk getting mauled by a bear? I know it's not really the point, but
Yeah. No.
there are certain things she needs to realize. He's a vampire. While yes, their lives are entwined and they love each other, he has more at the moment, more fighting capacity than you.
Yeah.
And like, if it's going to distract him for you to be there, or if, he's not going to be able to pay attention to what he's doing, then yeah, leave.
Hmm.
Go get help. Like, the whole reason I think they're having this conversation is because back when they first realized Juliet was there, Matthew's like, run, like, get away. And she's like, I'm
Hmm.
not leaving you. She could have ran to the house and got people.
She could have, yeah. She might have come back and he might have been dead, but he also
But,
might not have been distracted by her and he might have just killed Juliet.
mm-hmm.
Or Juliet might have ran after her and then just killed her. But anyway. So Diana at this point asks Matthew if she can call Isabeau, which is definitely interesting. But she basically tells Isabeau everything, even about the goddess slash huntress, which is weird. You'd think that she would tell Matthew everything or tell her aunts, but she wants to confide in Isabeau. And then Isabeau wants to tell her a tale the next time they see each other about the huntress as well. So Diana then talks to M, and Sarah is really upset for a few reasons after the attack. One of them is, I guess, she's also frustrated that she can't figure out how to train Diana because she thinks that it should be so easy to do these things that she doesn't know why Diana can't do it. And she's pissed that Diana willingly gave her blood to a vampire who could have killed her, which is understandable, but also Diana loves him, so she had to know that it was a possibility, really. And it is the first time that she's done it, so that's impressive, maybe, in their relationship, that she's never let him drink her blood before.
Like, what's the big deal?
Other than her almost dying, but like that didn't have to happen.
Yeah, but that's mostly just because he was half dead and not in his right mind. Like,
Mm.
what's wrong with him taking a sip here and there to keep him strong?
Um, Matthew gets home from hunting and he's looking better. He says that Diana is doing better too. So they're all around getting on better. The magic house has added an extra room because it knows someone's coming. And again, I love this house. I want one. We don't know who it is though at this point, and nobody can really figure it out. So I don't really know how the house figured it out, but it's pretty cool. Matthew isn't coddling Diana so much anymore, and he kind of explains that it's because since the fight, he knows that she can and will defend herself and she'll fight. He was worried that she would hesitate or that she would freeze, I guess, but she did actually eventually kill Juliet. And then they're having this conversation out basically where, on the way to where Juliet was killed. And she kind of thinks at one point, I didn't know Juliet, but I hated her so much that I could kill her. I'm like, you already did. Thinking this, you already killed her. Are you trying to justify it? I don't really understand that part. The tree where she saved Matthew is dying now. So she used the tree's life force to save him. I guess that was orchestrated through the goddess. Kind of makes her realize the severity of what she offered. And she, I guess, is kind of fearful a bit of what might happen now. But again, she's like, it is what it is. I had to do it. So Diana and Matthew tell the family that they're going to travel in time to find a teacher for Diana so that she can learn how to use her magic, because obviously it's not working out real well there. Sarah and Em are going to go to Isabeau, which I think is going to be interesting for them and for Isabeau. I'd love to have an entire story on that, especially them showing up at her door and her trying to get used to them basically, because they have loud personalities for sure.
It's like they're it's like Sarah is definitely going to be this like very loud, obnoxious type of person. Yzbo is going to be this like prim and proper person, and is just going to be apologizing for everybody and like trying to have them get along.
Yeah. Uh, they kind of debate different times that they should travel to, what would be the best time, and they talk a bit about the science behind time travel. We don't really get a whole lot of answers on like what happens to the old Matthew kind of thing, but I think that just kind of leaves it open. The visitors show up, and it's the demon from the beginning of the book, Agatha Wilson. It's her son Nathaniel and his wife Sophie, and they're both demons. But Sophie was born into a family of witches, which is definitely interesting, and she's also pregnant with a witch. So I don't really understand how two witches can make a demon, because I just thought that like witches' genes were just dominant no matter what. But I guess anything can really happen. Uh, but I just remember when Matthew and Hamish were talking about it, they talked about how demons could be born to any human and witches were born to witches. It just didn't really sound like this was a possibility. So I don't know if this is another thing that's kind of changing in the world. Sophie's pretty chill. She seems cool, unlike Nathaniel, who is like, we're doing what we're doing and we're getting the heck out of here. But Sophie's like, she loves that the house made a room for them. She's used to magical houses. She can see all the ghosts. Em insists that they stay there, and Sophie agrees. So Agatha, Agatha told Sophie to go to Diana, and she'd have a book for the baby, which kind of makes it seem like Ashmole 782 is going to be like a picture book or something.
Like, I really enjoy Sophie as a character. I think she's a really cool person. She seems real chill. She's just very like go with the flow type of
Hmm.
person, which I really appreciate. She's just like, yeah, we're just gonna do this, we're gonna do that, and she just like accepts everything for what it is,
Yeah,
which I really appreciate.
yeah, I agree. Well, I guess like if you're a demon born to witches, you kind of have to be,
Mm.
because your whole life is probably wild. So Sophie started having premonitions about Diana. And she also gives them a small figurine that she says has been passed down in her family for ages. And Matthew is basically shocked because it's from a chess set that he owned. And he doesn't understand how she could have gotten it. But he lost it in a wager during All Souls Night, which is coming up in a few weeks.
It's like Halloween.
Yeah. So then the house kind of makes a commotion, and Bridget Bishop's ghost talks to Diana and tells her that they'll need another object because, like Kristen said, they need three. So the house opens up and delivers a puppet, and it's one of Isabeau's earrings.
Yeah, the creepiest thing is that the puppet is like a little doll, almost like one of those like dolls you stick pins in.
Voodoo doll.
Yeah. But then they cut it open and it's got her earring inside.
A few days pass and they're kind of planning out how they're going to go about everyone dispersing. Halloween's going to kind of go off as normal for Sarah and Em since it's their favorite holiday, and they don't want anyone to be suspicious that they are kind of leaving. And everyone else is going to disperse at different times. The house kind of has a bunch of different creatures in it right now, and like tempers are high all the time. There's a lot of alpha energy, if you will. Matthew gives Diana a shit ton of vaccines, including the smallpox vaccine, which is like a live antigen.
But I will say, he never actually tells anybody where they're going, right? He doesn't tell anybody.
Mm-hmm.
Not even, like, Diana doesn't even know.
No.
So he's, like, giving her all these vaccines and, like, talking about time walking, but he's not telling anybody where they're going and why those vaccines are important.
Yeah. So they basically do a training montage of Diana learning how to time walk again. So she goes kind of alone for longer and longer trips, and then she takes Matthew with her and she does a few trips. The house finds another room because somebody else is coming. And again, none of the inhabitants know who's showing up, but Hamish comes to the door. And we find out that he's the ninth knight, and he is also pissed because I guess he got a letter too from Matthew, and Matthew had apparently promised him that he would never get this letter. I feel like he's just putting people on the Knights of Lazarus, and he's like, man, I promise this will never happen. And then something happens, and he's like, I'm sorry, you're on here now. Sucks to be you. Like, it's tricked a lot of people into being on this. Hamish also brought along a package that Matthew asked his mother to send to him. We don't hear what's inside of it, but it's the third object Matthew's asked for it because he was probably alive during the period they're going to if it's in the last 1,500 years. So that's what he got there. They're a proper conventicle now, which is a gathering of 3 witches, 3 demons, and 3 vampires. And they kind of have a conversation and start discussing war. There's heated discussions on all sides.
I will say, I find the imagery really great here. So the comparison, so like for each, so they've, the covenant and the congregation is also made up of 3 vampires, 3 witches, 3 demons. So it's a nice sort of nod to, well, now they have the anti congregation of this conventicle. So they also have 3 witches, 3 vampires, and 3 demons. And it's just nice, like, it's just nice symbolically. It's nice that it makes sense.
And theirs seems more like they want creatures to be able to be together, whereas the congregation is very much trying to keep them apart, even though they're a group of them all together.
Yeah.
So yeah, they start having discussions about war, and there's heated discussions on all sides. Nathaniel tells Matthew that wars are different now and everything is digital instead of in person, which Matthew can't really wrap his head around because he hasn't been in many wars, I guess, since they've been front lines and such. Sophie has seen in a premonition that the congregation comes for her and her baby after it's born. So she does agree to give their DNA to the vampire's lab. Hamish tries to warn Diana that Matthew's going to be different in the past. And it's really a good foreshadowing point that maybe she should have listened to him.
Yeah, she sort of is like, oh no, he's always going to be my Matthew. He's not going to change. But like, he's not the same person. Like, over the course of our lifetimes as humans, we grow and we change, and that's like what 80 years of changing. Like,
Hmm,
we don't know what time period they're going to, but whatever one they're going to, it's definitely going to be far enough away that Matthew could very well be a completely different person, and he's going to fall back into old habits.
exactly. And Hamish has known him for a lot longer than Diana's 3 weeks. So she really should take some of his advice.
I feel like everybody is better equipped to talk about Matthew than Diana is.
Agreed. So Hamish kind of discussed some legalities of them jumping in time, basically. Diana has to sign to make him power of attorney for her. She also signs 2 letters, and one of them's about the conference that she was supposed to talk at. So we finally get some closure about that conference. She can't go, which, it was fine that she procrastinated so much because she's not even going anyway. And then another's to the school basically saying that she's going to be away for a while. So Matthew also drew up a secret marriage agreement to give Diana a third of his assets. She kind of tries to refuse them, but like it's already done. Like there's nothing she can do about it. Also, realistically, it's kind of unlikely that he's going to die anyway before her. So if I were her, I'd just not worry about it anyway.
Man, I'm sorry, but if my rich husband who has uh, a bunch of cars, a private jet, a helicopter, if he loved me and wanted to give me half his money or a third of his money, heck yeah, I would take it. And I don't care if that makes me sound shallow. I would take it.
Realistically, she should be like, I'm getting this when you die. Where's what I get now? What do I get from this marriage?
Yeah, right? Like a little something something.
All right. Yeah, go back in time. That's exactly what I wanted.
Yeah.
Uh, Hamish insists that she create a will, and she decides that any of her assets should be divided between her and Matthew's children, both bio and maid children.
So Marcus.
Yeah. So far, we don't know.
Yes. But as of right now, Marcus.
Yeah, I don't know why she says biological children when like they haven't had sex, and Hamish probably doesn't realize that they could have a child. He's probably like, "What the fuck is this lady on?" Like she doesn't even know that he's a vampire. um, so Marcus is going to become the Grand Master of the Knights now, which he's not happy about. And because obviously Matthew's leaving, and Nathaniel is going to be one of the 8 knights, which is a change because generally all the knights were vampires until Hamish became the 9th knight, which the 9th knight generally doesn't fight at all. But now Nathaniel's going to be one of the 8 knights that fight, I guess, for lack of a better word, which is definitely progress in the intercreature world. So the plan is for everyone who isn't time walking to scatter and meet at Isabeau's house. That this night, which is I think like maybe 2 nights before Halloween or something, they end up time walking to the dancing night at Sator, which is just as cheesy this time around as last time.
That was like the night that they the almost like the first dinner, right? The first night they
Mm-hmm.
had dinner at Set Tour, and we remember that Matthew and Ysabeau have a nice dance, and then Matthew and Diana dance, and she floats in the air because she's so blissfully happy, and bleh.
Yeah. So they do that all over again. I don't
Ugh.
know. I don't know if they mention if she floats this time, but still, it's a lot. So on Halloween night, basically everybody leaves, and Matthew and Diana have some time together before they go. So he kind of suggests that they get some food that she loves, and she gets a long ass shower since the plumbing is shit wherever they're going. So that's a, I guess, clue of where they're going, because she still doesn't know, even though they're leaving in basically a few hours.
And
And
she's the one driving.
I know, yeah, really though. It's only been 40 days since they met, which is mind boggling.
Yeah. They've pledged their lives to each other.
And Matthew at this point decides that when they're safe, they'll consummate their marriage. But will they ever be safe? Like, that seems a bit ridiculous. And she's already on birth control. So why is she even taking the birth control if they're not going to have sex? Because, like, that shit fucks you up. why, why would you make somebody take birth control and then not even let her benefit?
Well, but like, even still, so if they're obviously going back to a time when there's no plumbing. That means
Yeah.
that they're going somewhere not primitive, but somewhere sort of old school. Are they going to take like are they going to take a bunch of packs of pills of birth control pills with them?
I guess they're just not going to have sex there. They should have had sex before they went while she was on the birth control and then tried not to while they were there. I don't think it would have worked, but obviously their plan doesn't work either if you read the other books. But Halloween night is kind of cute. She actually is able to light the lanterns outside the house with her magic, which I guess is because she needs them lit because it's Halloween. Diana puts on a witch costume that I guess Sarah normally wears to pass out candy. And the first trick or treater that show up are, of course, a vampire and a witch holding hands, and it's adorable. Um, this whole trick or treating scene really shows how good Matthew is with children, of course. Even though he's literally a monster, he literally, A, kills people.
Mm-hmm.
He literally killed Jillian, and he went to Canada and probably drained somebody. I don't know, maybe he didn't drain them completely, but maybe he did. She's shocked that he's so good with kids, which I'm like, yeah, maybe you shouldn't let him near them, because, dude. Um, Matthew finally tells her that they're going to Elizabethan England to a hunting lodge where Matthew Christopher Marlowe, who he calls Kit.
In case you don't know who Christopher Marlowe is he is a renowned playwright of the time that people assume wrote a lot of the Shakespearean plays. Like a lot of people
Mm-hmm.
think that William Shakespeare uh, actually
Stole his shit.
plagiarized, yeah, plagiarized and stole Christopher Marlowe's plays. So apparently, him and Matthew are like BFFs.
And yeah, he finally gives Diana whatever he asked for his mother to send. And there's a book there, and it's one of Kit's books, and there's an inscription in it. And she kind of touches it and gets the feeling of the meaning behind the words, I guess, because she like touches his handwriting and can tell that Kit was like madly in love with Matthew. So that part is, I guess, a tiny bit of foreshadowing. Um, but yeah, they're going to the year 1590. And Diana, of course, is super excited about all the historical figures and the historical things that she might see while she's there. Isabeau also sent Matthew a ring to give to Diana that Philip once gave to her. And they kind of say their vows, and they're now, he says, married in every way, except for, like witnesses, officiants, consummation for one. Like the official documents you sign. Like they're not even married in any way. But sure, Matthew, go off. So Matthew and Diana pick up their foot and kind of travel back in time, and that is the end of them for the book. After she can kind of smell the fruit outside of the cottage that she's going to, so we kind of assume that she got there. And then Sarah and Em come back to close up the house. And the house gives Sarah the letter that Matthew left and the book. And the book kind of shows her that they did make it back in time because it's written, I think Diana wrote in it, and you can tell that it's from that long ago, basically. Yeah.
Yeah, I felt the same. Although I wonder if they're going back to like Elizabethan England, how did they get a really old note to New York?
I guess Matthew kept it, or someone gave it to Isabeau. Philippe maybe gave it to Isabeau at some point. I don't really know. Yeah, because that was in the package, and Isabeau was like, "I thought you might need this," and he doesn't understand why until he looks inside and can see that basically it looks like Diana, I think, had written in it. So Sarah then burns both the letter and the book in the house, which is a bit odd. It's still something from the 1950s that she just burnt. I know it's like something of Diana's, but like that's historical. Um, so yeah, Sarah burns both of those things, the letter and the book, and Sarah just kind of has left the house with a fire going. I know the house is like, I guess she knows the house is going to put it out itself, but I'm like, damn, you sure believe in that house a lot.
Can I be honest and say that, like, for me, when I was reading the last few pages and Sarah and Em left to give, I guess, Matthew and
Hmm.
Diana some time alone and then gave them time to, like, actually do the time walk, I was concerned because they didn't take their cat.
I was too. I thought that they were gone.
Yeah, I thought they had left and they were not coming back, and they left the poor cat in the house by itself. But then when they came back,
Hmm.
they scooped up the cat and took the cat with them again. So,
Yeah.
you know,
Well, I guess the house would have been able to feed the cat as long as there was cat food somewhere in its recesses.
yeah.
Um, yeah, so then they get into a car with, I guess, their friends, and they're going to go RVing for a bit before they jet off to Setur.
Yeah.
And the book just kind of ends with the ghosts chatting at the end of the book.
Yeah, that's our end.
Yeah.
We don't like we assume that Matthew and Diana made their way back in time. Uh and we assume that everybody else is safe.
Lots of
So,
assumptions.
lots of
There's
assumptions.
It's not too cliffhangery. Like there's obviously some cliffhangers, but it's not like you're unsure if someone's gonna live or die. Like it's not
Yeah.
too bad of a book. Obviously you want to know what happens. They're gone to the past. Like are they ever gonna make it back? But yeah.
Yeah, and I will say that the only thing that sort of is like, not that it's not satisfying, because it is, but the the climax was quite short, right? It was just that little chapter or two with Juliet. Really, that was our sort
Hmm.
of our big climax moment, and then it sort of like slowly, like instead of like coming right up and then dropping right off, it sort of like slowly went back down the hill. So there wasn't really this like really super intense moment near the end that needed resolving.
Hmm. Yeah.
Um, in the show, because of that, they sort of added, and this is one of the things they changed, but I didn't actually hate it. Um,
Hmm.
in the show, the end of the first season, they're they're pressed for time because members of the congregation are coming upon the house, right? They're
Yeah.
coming for them, and they are coming in with a vengeance, like they're coming to do harm.
Yeah.
And then they get there and, oh, there's nobody here.
Hmm.
So it sort of like gives it a little bit more suspense.
Which a show definitely needs more so than a book does.
Yeah, but it was still a satisfying ending.
Yeah. I thought that you were going to talk about the non existent climax moment, which was them not consummating their marriage. So that's where I thought you were going at first when you said climax, and I giggled.
I mean, that too, though,
Yeah, right?
because that also did not happen. We did not, like, there were lots of like, there was a good few like steamy moments, but we didn't get like a real good sexy time.
No, for sure.
But I guess that's what book two is for. maybe. Okay. So that wraps it up for this week. We're done our first full book.
Yay!
Yay. If you want to get in touch with us and share your thoughts on anything you heard in our episodes, or if you have any book suggestions, you can email us at coffeeandcoread@gmail.com. And be sure to check us out on Twitter and Instagram at Coffee and Co-Read. That's COFFEEANDCOREAD.
And next week, we're going to be reading a new book. So we're going to tackle the first book in the Crescent City series, which is House of Earth and Blood by Sarah J. Maas. We're going to be doing chapters 1 to 14. So be sure to pick up your copy and follow along. And if you're enjoying our chats, don't forget to follow, rate, and review wherever you find our content. Thanks for listening, everyone, and we'll see you on the next page.